The Wonderware Historian Client Query is an application that allows you to retrieve data from a historian database and return the results in a table format. It provides you with a point-and-click interface, very easy to use, where you can choose from a number of predefined query types, customize them, and in that way eliminate the need to know structured query language syntax. So basically, you don't need to know SQL language because the query is created for you. And after the query is created, you can still make your changes and it will dynamically change and test the results. So you can keep customizing it until you find what you're looking for. Depending on your operating system, you will access the Historian Client Query in a different way. Here in my Metro UI, I have a tile created for it. So if I click on it, this is the first thing we are going to get, the server list configuration dialog. If you haven't yet created an access to a historian server, then you will be prompted to do so here. So here I enter the name of my historian server and I will use integrated security for my credentials. Click add. I'm logged on, close it. Okay, here we go. So I am connected to the historian server and here I have the list of all my tags. Now we already know this interface. This is the tag picker. Here we have the servers pane, the tags pane, and the filter pane. And we will use it here in the same way we have used it with the other clients. We have also the main toolbar, the query toolbar, and in this area is where we are going to play with our queries. So this one is the columns pane, and this one is the results pane. In the query toolbar, we have three fields, the query type, the server, and the database. Since our server is a historian server, the database selected by default is the runtime database. Now, under the query type, we find all the predefined queries that this client offers. So by default, we have selected the tag details. And notice that in the columns pane is where we can start customizing this query. So if I start unchecking options, for example, if I uncheck the description, notice that on the results pane, under the data tab, that description disappeared. So let me check it back again. There it is. Now it's gone. And this is how we are going to customize this specific query. Now in this example, we are retrieving data for a batch tag, but maybe that's not what we are looking for. So we can go in the tag picker and notice that when I click in any other tag, the results will update immediately. There we go. Now I am displaying information for the m100.lt.pv, for the m100.tt.pv, and if I use the control key, I can select more than one tag and have information for several tags at a time. Now this is the data and we can see it here, but where is the query? Under the results pane, there is another tab called SQL, and here is where we can see how the query is built. Now, if we do changes, either here under columns pane, for example, let's check again description, notice that the query gets updated. Same thing here, if I select a different set of tags, for example, this object tag, now the where statement in my query change. So let's do that again. Notice that as I add tags, that query gets updated immediately. And my data changes as well. Now let's review the pre-configured queries we have listed here. So the first one is the aggregate values. And with this one, you can view aggregated values for the specified tags. In the first tab, we select the format, narrow format or wide format. So notice that as I click on them, the format of my data displayed will change. Then we have the time tab. In the time tab, we select the time period for the query and which time zone we want to use if other than the local time zone. Then under criteria, we have the chance to filter out even more our data. And what you see here depends on what we selected on format. So since I selected narrow format, here under criteria, I have a value criteria. If I select wide query format, then under criteria, I will have a tag name criteria. Under calculations, this is where we can see the different aggregations that are supported. We have count, minimum, maximum, sum, average, and standard deviations. These ones are calculated using the standard SQL Server aggregation functions. So for example, if I select minimum, maximum, notice that the values get updated immediately. Then under the Retrieval tab, we select which retrieval mode we want to use, cyclic or delta, and then we can customize each of them. So for cyclic, you can customize either the number of cycles you want to use or the resolution of them. So right now by default is 1000 milliseconds. If we select delta, you can limit the number of rows to be retrieved and the time deadband and value deadband if you want to apply any. Finally, under the source, you can select the version of data you want to see, original or latest. The next one listed is alarm history. And with this one, you can query the database to return the alarm history for any tag. You can even further narrow down the query to only return the tag values that are beyond an alarm limit. So for example, here, I am going to select a React temp because I know that one has some alarm limits configured. And notice that right now, my values are all the way from 97 to 16 so far. Well, if I start customizing, first here on the columns, I can select different fields. So for example, if I want to see the description or not. Time, again, this is the time period that will be covered by the query. And here under alarm limits, I can enable the use of the alarm limits. So if I click here, notice that all the values that are under 100 disappear from my query. Right now I am looking only to the values that are beyond the alarm limits, 100 and 180. You can also exclude values that are not null, and you can apply another layer of filtering by selecting the quality, which quality values you want to be considered on this query, only good, bad, doubtful, or just not used. Then under the Retrieval tab, you can again select cyclic or delta. Under source, if you want to see original or latest, and in order, you can sort out your data by tag name, value, or date time in ascending or descending order. The next one listed is alarm limits. And with this one, you can see all the alarm limits that are configured on your database. So right now we have only for React Temp a high and high. The only option to customize this query is to order it by tag name. The next one is analog summary values. And with this one, you can retrieve the summary data for analog or analog summary tags. So here on the columns tab, we have a lot of options to retrieve, for example, the first value or the last value or the value count and even the WW version. So you can retrieve a lot of data that was not available in the queries we have seen so far. Then we have the time. We can define here the time period that the query will cover and the retrieval if you want to use cyclic or full. If you use full, then you can limit the number of rows because remember, full is going to retrieve everything that you have stored in the database. You can also select which data version to see, if latest or original. In the next one, we have annotations. And here you can view the annotations that were made by database users for some of the tags. So for example, I want to see all the public annotations made by all users. Here we go. I have 3 annotations done so far. We have also the option to select all the tags on the server, and this one is a pretty useful one because we don't know which tags have annotations or not. So with this one, we are going to be able to retrieve all of them. And then we have the option to retrieve also the username. So who did the annotation? I want to see who's the author of that annotation. Then we have a custom query. And in this one, we don't have anything. We don't have tag picker. We don't have columns pane. The only thing we have is SQL and data. And here, basically, you can type your query. So I can type here, select all from history where tag name equals React temp. Let's change this for single quote. And here we have a typo. And if I go to my data, it is updating automatically. So as I change manually my query here, this one is gonna get updated. Now this is if you already know SQL language and you want to test your query from here. The next one is the event history values. So with this one, you can see all the events that occur for specified event tags. So we know, and you can see here on the tag picker, we have only 4 event tags and they are already filtered out for us for this query. And with this query, we can see all the occurrences of those events. So for example, I'm gonna select here for the last 30 minutes. And here under the columns, I wanna see the description and I wanna see the detection date and time. And I wanna see it for all 4 tags. So here we go. I have all my 4 event tags listed. You can customize the time period and the order in which the data is displayed. So for example, right now it's all mixed up. If I want to do it for tag name, I can do it, and ascending or descending. The next one is event snapshot, and this one basically will display information about, and with this one you can view the data values for selected tags that have the same timestamp as a detected event. So for example, we know that for our transfer event, we have configured a snapshot for batch number, prod level, React level, and React temp. So here I can see each of them. You can define some columns to display the time period for the query and the order in which the data is displayed. Then we have history values. With history values, you can retrieve history data for any tag. You can even retrieve data for multiple types of tags in the same query. So for example, I can retrieve data for my discrete value and here for an analog, no problem. Under the columns pane, again, we have a lot of data that we can retrieve, a lot of columns, for example, the version of the data, the cycle count used to retrieve it, the resolution. Under the time, we define the period for that query, format, narrow or wide. Depending on what we select here, we have a criteria. If it is narrow table, the criteria is a value criteria. If we have a wide table, then is a tag name criteria. Then under the retrieval tab, we have 2 tabs, the main options and the other. And under the main options, we have listed all the retrieval modes available, all the ones that we already reviewed. Depending on the retrieval mode, you can customize it either by defining the cycles or by defining some dead bands if you are using Delta. Under Other, you can define the history version, latest or original, and you can customize, for example, a state retrieval. So if I am using here round trip, I will have here enabled my state calculation. Transformations, the remove outliers, convert analog values to discrete, and snap to base value. And then we have the order tab. Here you can select the order of the data if you want to order it by tag name, value, or date time. Next one is the I/O server. And this one will retrieve basic configuration information for all the I/O servers configured to use with Historian. So for example, I want to see not only the description, but the application name and the topic name and the topic timeout. So here I have all my I/O servers listed. The next one is live values, live data. Remember, there is only one live value per tag, and this is not really live data. It's just the last value that was stored in the database. So I can select here a set of tags and for all of them see the last value that was stored in the database. Here we can customize the columns that we can see and the time zone that you want to use. The next one is number of tags. How many columns do we expect for a number of tags query? Well, that's it. Just one, number of tags. Which tag type? Analog, discrete, event, string, or all of them? Then we have the server version. Similar to the number of tags, just one value. I just want to see the version of my current Historian server. Next one, we have the state summary values. And with this one, you can retrieve the summary data for state summary, analog, discretes, or string tags. So for example, if I go to my discretes and I select one of my valves, here I have some summary information. Now I can select the state count, minimum, maximum, average, total, percent, and all the contained ones. Under the time tab, we can select the time period to cover with this query. Criteria, we have 3 options to filter out some data. And then under the retrieval, we can select cyclic or full. The next one is storage. So basically this one is retrieving configuration information from my historian regarding the directories that I have configured for storing history files. So I have my 4 storage types: circular, alternate, buffer, and permanent. I can see also the maximum storage size, the minimum threshold. Then we have the storage size available. So how much space do I have configured on my different directories to historize data? Then we have the storage start date, which one is the timestamp for my oldest history block in this system. Next one, we have the summary values. With this one, you are going to see summarized values as calculated by the event subsystem. If you want to see values calculated with the standard SQL aggregation functions, you can use the aggregate values query type. But with this one, it's values as calculated by the event system. So for the columns tab, we can select the tag name, description, decimal places, date and time include milliseconds, and by default, only quality here is checked. On time, you define the time period for the query, and here under calculations, you select the calculation type, which can be minimum, maximum, average, or sum, and the calculation frequency. So you have 3 options: 300, 900, and 3600, which corresponds to the frequencies that are defined in my event tags. Next, you have to select your tags. So for example, let's choose prod level. I know that one is related to one of my events. And here I have the aggregations. Now I don't see which aggregations are these, so I can select show for the calculation type. And now I know that all these are averages. In the next one, we have tag details. So this one is going to retrieve all the configuration details for the tags. We can also see when they were created, the address, and the acquisition type and acquisition rate, for example. The next one is tag search. And with this one, you can search for tags. Here you can select them, for example, by events or for summary tags or for discretes. And the last one is the time running. Time running is just going to retrieve one value, which is the amount of time in minutes that the Wonderware historian has been running since the last startup. Now there is a query type we haven't talked about here yet, which is the favorites. So to start talking about the favorites, first I'm going to go to history values. And now from the options menu, I'm going to select the all queries option. Now when I click on it, notice that there is a third tab that appears on my results pane. And if I select it, it's empty. So let's go back to data. And I'm going to start customizing this query. So I'm going to change this for my m100lt.pv. I'm going to select m100.tt.pv. I don't want to see the engineering units, for example. And now I go back to my all queries tab. And here we have a history of all the queries that we have created so far. So every time you do a modification, a new query is created. And this tab is keeping track of all of them. Now I can go now to File, Save. And I can save this file as a SQL script file, meaning you can take these queries and open it in your SQL Management Studio, for example, or any other application that talks SQL language. So I'm going to save it here as my queries. I will save it under my training folder. And now I'm going to go to my favorites query type. And from here, I have the option to select a favorite queries folder. So where did I save my queries? Well, I saved them under my training folder. So I'm going to search for my training folder, click OK, and here we go, my queries.sql. And now I can see all the queries that I created and execute them against the database. Okay, so I think we are ready for our lab.